Hey everybody, this is Christopher J. Finn, and we are working on Chapter 3 of Stitches on the Stone, a novel written by me, video produced by me, because I can't afford anybody else to do it. So, getting started. Um, I'm gonna forego the little interesting news this go around because this chapter is slightly longer than the others. So I wanted to jump into it right away. Now, to recap, last week we hit chapter 2, which was the introduction to Benji, the introduction to Larry, and the strange happenings that are starting to hint in the story. And this will progress onto it, and we begin with Edward, who is where we left off. Larry escorted the smelly, half drunk Edward out Smokehouse Sam's smokery and taking him to his home. So this begins November 3rd, and Edward. Larry had led Edward to the doorstep of his home, which, as it turned out, really did exist. He didn't have a key and had no desire to shatter the window to gain entry, fearing who might lurk within. An angry wife, a goading girlfriend or boyfriend, perhaps. He had no way of knowing and little desire to find out. So, after Larry something or other had clapped him on the shoulder and said, "There you go, Pirate Menzies. Nice house. Can't say it suits you. Go on and wipe the shit off your body. Maybe soak in a bath for a few days, hmm?" Larry had turned and left him without saying another word. All Edward could do was watch the older man disappear down the street. Edward had walked to the front stoop and sat, curiously dreading that someone might open the door and ask him inside. It would have saved him some trouble, he supposed, though the thought of having to explain himself when he had no discernible memory before his wakening beneath a bridge scared the crap out of him. Ed then eyed the neighboring homes. There were variations in color, maybe an added gable here, a louver there, but otherwise all appeared identical, his home included. The driveways were straight-laid, lawns meticulously manicured. To Ed, it all seemed a mockery of some long-abandoned American dream. And he lived here? Really? So, not knowing what else to do, he had leaned against his front door and closed his eyes. He woke some time after midnight. A frigid breeze nipped at his exposed hands and cheeks, his costume offering no protection from the sharp drop in temperature. He felt stiff and yet trembled uncontrollably. His head ached, hell, his whole body ached, as if compressed by a giant vice. "Oh, holy fucking hell," he chattered. "Christ, he had to get inside, and fast." Edward pushed himself to his feet. Each tiny movement shot daggers throughout his body, and when he tried to speak, to vocalize his plight and force his body to move, only a rattled whisper slipped past his clicking teeth. He stumbled, keeping himself upright by sheer will alone. Ed gripped the handrail leading from his porch to the sidewalk and focused his blurry gaze on the tips of his feet. They were so flippin' heavy. He could fall right here just beyond the porch of a home he didn't recognize and wasn't entirely sure he wanted. He was just so damn cold. He could die here. Who'd know? Who'd care? He glanced around the browning grass of his home. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Perhaps a tiny figurine, a garden gnome, anything standing out as extraordinary, something hiding a key. His eyes landed on a peculiar stone sitting beneath a bush trimmed in the shape of a sphere. A riverstone, he noted. He lifted the decorative gray stone, thumbing over the painted eyes and stitched mouth. Odd, sure. Seemed like some wackadoo kid painted the thing and grew bored of it, Edward noting how the right side of the smile was missing a few hash marks. As he stood, a small metal object dropped into his cupped hand, holding the rock. A key. "Yes!" he shouted. He gripped both sides of the stone and walked to the front door. Edward shivered. He pressed the copper-colored key into the lock and then paused, his index finger and thumb hovering on either side of the key. Time crawled for an agonizing moment. A bubble of heated air enveloped his body as if he stood next to a roaring campfire. He inhaled deeply and closed his eyes, enthralled by the sudden change in atmosphere. Energy pulsed throughout his body, and Edward's heartbeat slowed while tears streamed down his cheeks. A melodious, young, feminine voice sounded within his mind saying, "You can turn around and walk away, Eddie, and the month before it begins." "It's cold," Edward replied. "Is it?" the voice sang. Edward stiffened as heat pricked at his skin. Ed snorted, then shook his head when the voice within continued. "Now isn't this better? Why turn a key when paradise is but a few steps away?" Edward turned. Trees rustled as if cued, sending piles of leaves across the center of the cul-de-sac. He moved his foot toward the stoop and returned to the door when the dreary feeling of sleep returned. "Forget November, Eddie, and it will end. For you, the town, and all of the people in it," the young voice promised. "Just turn around." "It's an ice cube out there," he replied. He returned his attention to the key sitting in the lock. 30 nights might as well be 1,000. "Open this door, Eddie, and you can never turn back. Open this door, and the game begins anew. You don't want to start again, do you? How many nights, how many days, how many years upon years upon years must we suffer, Eddie? Walk away, go back to the bridge, go back to sleep. You know it's where you belong. It's all the mercy left to you. Stay, and you will hurt, Eddie. You will hurt as you've never hurt before." The voice sang in his mind as if it was speaking child to child. Edward didn't like it, and certainly didn't like how the voice addressed him. He's an adult with a key in his hand, about to unlock his goddamn front door, his door into his warm home. No one talks to him like that. No one. Not within his mind, and certainly not to his face. Besides, how many days must he freeze his testicles numb? How long must he wallow in mud and sand? Not 1 damn minute more. Normal sounded right appetizing about now, and he was going to partake in this particular feast. Thank you very much. A roaring fire and a dry pair of underwear sounded like pure, polished gold. "Open this door, and the only thing I'm going to do is get warm. I'll sit my ass in a nice hot bath, sip some wine, if there is any, and carry my butt to bed," Edward decided, turned the key, and stepped inside. The river rock, discarded some time during Edward's private mental parley, rested humbly on a brown doormat at the base of his front door, its smiling face cocked away from the welcome message printed in bold white. A chill breeze stressed the windows lining Edward's front porch, forming a thin layer of ice along the edges nearest the sill. Old caulking shattered and popped, and the wood surrounding the window split. The thin, stitched line of the stone curled ever so slightly, as if it wanted to frown before disappearing into a puff of white smoke. Janice pulled a tight-knitted blanket over her shoulders while leaning back in her rocking chair. She had spent the night sitting in the study, waiting for sleep that would never come. A deep chill kept her mind in a state of unease where she felt as if she were sitting over a block of dry ice. The cold rippled through skin and bone, and Janice felt the sensation, unnatural and dirty. Shadows licked at the heels of her vision and suggestively whispered in her ear, saying, "The stone, Janice. You need the stone." The voice, feminine and evocative, held no tone. When she concentrated on the words, really focused on the message, she pictured wind flowing through a corrugated tube. No notes, no song, only a maelstrom of shrill ideas that either pushed her away or drew her in. Demons for sure, and she cursed a lot of them. Still, these revelations did not explain why she couldn't sleep. Janice's body ached, and her muscles felt cumbersome. Even the dim light of the dawning sun offered little aid as she tried to coax her body towards sleep. Instead, Janice sat in the center of her study, peering out over Pasca Lake, and all she could think to do was rub her eyes. She kicked and lifted her feet above the floor and rocked the chair, allowing the gentle sway to settle her mind. A lamp lit in her frontal lobe once she closed her eyes, highlighting a picture of the river rock complete with 2 blinking eyes and a horrible stitched smile. The stone hovered mere feet away, and Janice wondered if she could reach out and stroke its smooth surface. She opened her eyes and sighed. Throughout the night, long after Janice decided sleep was simply out of the question, she gazed out her window towards the railroad switchyard near the bridge where the old import factories lay in ruin. The rock was or had been there. Her mind furiously mapped paths wrapping around the lower south side of Lauradelle, far from the direct route of Main Street and Lawson Boulevard. Janice didn't know why and didn't question whatever guidance system chose this particular path. She only knew she had to hold the river rock in her hand one more time. She needed to understand its intent. Was it evil? She had to know. How she would travel to its location seemed specific, and Janice wasn't about to counter her deep-rooted premonitions with vocal objections. She was going to meet the devil in the stone head on. If something told her how and where to do this, so much better. The more she considered her options, the more time slipped away. An hour, 2, who on God's great earth knew for sure, passed in a teardrop of moments. Was it a half sleep? She supposed it could have been. Everyone's been known to drift off in a conscious dream state from time to time, though Janice didn't feel this to be the case. She called her lovelies to her side, pulled Blossom into her lap, and stroked her soft fur. Her mind cleared momentarily, and then she drifted again, losing herself to the broken switchyard buildings before fading into another pointless nightmare. Janice jerked as a bone-chilling fever poked at the edge of her consciousness, and she stared into the painted eyes of the stone hovering inches from her nose. It was like the fucking thing mocked her at every turn. Then, a moment later, it was gone, and Janice found herself staring out of the study's window once again. Janice pushed, rocked, and pushed, smiling as the chair creaked and arced over the old hardwood floor of her study. It reminded her that no matter how deep she slipped into the disturbing visions of the stone, she was still here, locked in the present. She found this to be a breathing testament to her sanity, something she was more than happy to hang over the accursed object's head should she cross paths with it again. The sun peeked over the rooftops, basking Janice in a wave of welcoming warmth. Hints of dust danced about her room like tiny golden angels, and a shadow draped across her ceiling in the shape of a cross. She stood and watched in holy awe as the shadow slowly crawled to the wall opposite the window. "Signs come in all forms," she muttered. After lifting her fingers to her lips, she kissed her knuckle, signifying her commitment to the Almighty's task of discovery, or whatever the fuck was trying to guide her. The moment was lost when the sound of running water caught her attention. She sleepily walked from the study, rubbed her eyes, and entered the kitchen. Charles hovered over a bag of coffee beans, using a pair of reading glasses to magnify the instructions printed on the bag. He grunted, placed the coffee on the counter, and absently scratched his left ass cheek. He ran a hand through his gray hair and then set both hands on the countertop and shook his head. She sighed, and Charles turned to greet her. "Oh, good morning, dear. I didn't want to disturb you," Charles croaked. He lifted a shaking, liver-spotted hand in a feeble attempt at a wave. He chuckled briefly and displayed the coffee beans to his wife. "You know, it's been years since I tried to brew a pot of this." He shuffled his way to the island at the center of the kitchen. "Hard to believe I've lost touch with something so basic." "Everyone loses touch with something," Janice replied. She walked to the counter and began brewing the morning coffee. "You don't?" "Of course I do, Charles. Don't be silly." "Do you?" he asked. Janice raised a brow when she noticed he wasn't looking at her. "You're a marvel, Janice Mayfair." always moving forward, always striving to do better. He displayed his hands. All I do is age. Janice sat next to him. She pulled his hand into her own, hoping to ease whatever strife that led to this melancholy mood. Unfortunately, Janice, locked in a very similar situation, could relate. Dark bags marred her usually glowing complexion, and her entire body felt heavy. Charles cupped Janice's hand and smiled. You were up all night, weren't you? He asked. She nodded. He lowered his eyes. Something I said? Janice shook her head. No. Something I did or didn't do? Janice didn't respond. She supposed she could have told him the truth, told him about the rock and the hard place it was putting her in, but what was the point? Why get him involved? Even when Janice redirected her attention to the coffee cup on the counter, or her two little darlings waiting for their walk, or even meeting Charlie's later in the day for lunch, her mind would simply shut down as if rebooting. Janice poured the coffee, had a creamer, and returned to her seat next to her husband. She offered him a cup. Charles thanked her, and then both sat in relative silence for several minutes. Eventually, Charles pressed Janice for information on her state of being, and she thwarted each attempt with silence and a passive smile. Janice stood, kissed Charles' forehead, returned to the sun-drenched study, and closed the door. She pressed her back against the wall and sighed before silently crying. In the matter of a day, life had erected walls on all sides. No doors, only shadows. The toneless voice awoke within her mind and suggested, Let him be. Just find the stone and all will be well, Janice Mayfair. You can, and we can be free. The absurdity of this small trinket holding such power over Janice forced a chuckle beneath a pool of building tears. You're an absolute loon, Janice Mayfair, she whispered. She wanted to believe it. One look outside reinvigorated her desire to head to the switchyard, and her mood soured. No, by God, you're not losing your mind. She was better than this, and her resolve led her to the phone, dialing Madeline's number. Madeline, we've got a job to do. Together, they would get to the bottom of this. Pause for coffee. By the way, you can buy this absolutely wonderful. That way. Turn. BoogieRags/ChristopherJFinn.com. Just hit the link on Twitch if you go to BoogieRags or twitch.tv/BoogieRags and click the merchandise item. Benji. Intermission over, by the way. Benji. Once the pirate Menzies had left the smoke shop, Benji's day pleasantly slipped into the sweet boredom only a lazy November weekend could offer. Mom had relieved him at noon, and Benji had pedaled home to spend the rest of his day behind the computer screen. He had fallen asleep and woke early on the following morning. His day began with a hunt for clean enough clothing. The gym sock aroma stinging his nostrils suggested it might be time to pack up the gear and send a basket down to the laundry room. Mom and her rules. You want clean clothes? Bring down your laundry. A lesson, kids. He supposed seeing the floor would be a welcome change, so he resolved to address that particular monster after breakfast. Until then, well, his jeans weren't wholly stiff, and his shirt drawer still secreted away one or two t-shirts. Benji emerged into the calm light of a chilly Sunday morning to the smells of bacon, coffee, and cinnamon. He nodded favorably, closed the door to the attic, and stepped into the dining room. To the left of the hall, pointed dead at him, were those damn shoes. Bronco fucking boots, he stated sourly. Finest wares in the land, Larry Tweedle replied from the living room. Benji cocked his head enough to see a pair of black socks propped up on a coffee table. No flippin' way. What are you doing here? Benji asked, relieved to see Tweedle dressed in a short-sleeved white-collared shirt and khaki trousers, an outfit suggesting he dropped by unannounced. Mom, faithful to her word, hadn't invited him to spend the night. Needs, my boy, he replied, leaning forward just enough so his droopy eyes met Benji's. And right now, I need a little breakfast. Coming up, Benji's mother chirped from the kitchen. Larry strolled into the dining room, pulled out the chair closest to the kitchen, and sat. Sit down, Larry offered, poking at a chair with his toes. I could use the company. Benji sat, and Larry extended a crooked smile. I was just telling your mother about Pirate Menzies. Oh my, yes! She appeared in the doorway while wiping her hands on an apron. Did that happen? You saw it? Benji nodded. Why didn't you tell me? Benji shrugged. I don't know. Didn't occur to me, I guess? Larry's eyes widened. Didn't occur? He glanced at Benji's mother, then pointed a meaty finger at Benji. Didn't occur. An all-out catfight over a man dressed as a pirate, and it didn't occur to him. Sue me. I was busy, Benji replied bitterly. Larry raised a brow, thought for a moment, then nodded. Apologies, young master. Sympathy shot Benji a warning glare. He ignored her. What'd you do with the guy? The pirate? I walked his smelly ass home. What else could I do? Language! Benji's mother scolded. Oh, he smelled like ass, all right, Benji agreed. Larry extended both hands and looked over his shoulder. Benjamin! Don't blame the lad, my dear. We're all a disordered mess when dealing with pirates and cigars, Larry mused. Benji chuckled, then silently cursed. Christ, he had to learn to control himself, especially around this guy. Don't give Tweedle an inch, not one hair of satisfaction. His mother frowned and returned to her cooking. Larry glanced over his shoulder. Fine, lady, he murmured. Fine indeed. Whatever you're doing, Benji snarled, it ain't gonna happen. Larry raised both hands in defense. What am I doing? He glanced about the room. I'm sitting here, just like you, no ill intent nor will, just a hungry man waiting on his breakfast. That's my goddamn breakfast. Benji hissed. I'll see you get a plate. Benji's mother emerged from the kitchen, offering Larry a dish. Larry smiled, thanked her, and as she turned, Larry mouthed first, while displaying his index finger to Benji. He offered Samantha a warm smile, and took her hand in his, brushed his fingers along the back of her wrist. You spoil me, he said, turned and clapped his hands. Benji's mother scurried back to the kitchen. Knock it off, Benji hissed. Larry again displayed both hands in protest. What? Nothing wrong with a little appreciation for a gracious host? He nibbled on a piece of bacon for a moment, then leaned back. Benji furrowed his brow, crossed his arms, and glared at Larry. Whatever effect Larry hoped this would have on Benji backfired horribly. He wasn't buying into whatever this bastard was selling, and Benji was going to damn well make his feelings known. Benji pressed his lips tight when his mother returned to the dining room with 2 plates in hand. Larry stretched, reached around her, and offered a gentle pat on her rump. Samantha shuddered, smiled, blushed, and patted her way to her seat. She dropped Benji's plate on the table far enough away that he had to lean toward his mother to retrieve it. Samantha regained her composure and cleared her throat. So, Larry, what are your plans for the day? Plans? He shrugged, then stuffed a piece of bacon into his mouth. He swallowed, gulped down his coffee, then continued. Oh, no plans, my dear. It's the day of rest, after all. No finer time to enjoy good company. He winked at Benji and smiled. Benji rolled his eyes. Was Mom buying this shit? She had to see this was nothing more than a show to piss Benji off. What he couldn't figure out was why. What was this guy playing at? Why screw with the kid? Was he hoping Benji would explode, reach across the table, and choke the life out of him? It was a thought, of course, and it brought back the memories of the smiley-faced stone and the divot he'd create in this old goat's head when he beamed him with it. Benji kind of wished he had it in hand. What about you, Benji, my boy? Sticking around for a while? You wish, he stated harshly. Benjamin! Mom, you promised! Benji's tone, screechy shout echoed off the walls of his home, and both Larry and Samantha shrank from the response. And Benji knew the remainder of the conversation would turn to a steaming pile of dog dew. Hell, the smug look on Larry's face said as much. Discussion over. The winner, Larry freaking Tweedle. I told you he would not spend the night, and he has not, she replied sharply beneath a brutal, warning glare. I can't spend the night? Larry asked innocently. No! Benji squealed. Not now, not ever. Mom, come on! Samantha slammed both hands on the table and shouted, Enough! The house grew silent. Larry leaned forward, both brows raised sympathetically in Samantha's direction. She returned an apologetic shrug enhanced by a drawn sigh. They both turned to Benji. He pounded the edge of the table in disgust, then turned his attention outside. This smug son of a bitch just rolled him. Benji, it's just breakfast, son. Nothing more, nothing less. Oh, that was, sorry. My bad. Rewind. Benji? It's just breakfast, son. Nothing more, nothing less. I ain't your damn son, Benji seethed. No, I suppose not. Honestly, I was in the area and thought I'd drop by and say hello to both you and your mother. I promise, Benji, no ill intent. Scout's honor. He held up 3 fingers. Doing what? Pardon? You're in the neighborhood doing what? What business could you possibly have here in the Commons? Benji, really, is it that important? He's a friend, and I'm flattered he thought of me on his day off. I'm glad for the company, Benji's mother sued. Thank you very much, Larry stated. He placed a hand over his heart. Did he tell you he stole from the store? Benji rounded on Larry. Did you? Cigars and booze, right, Larry? His voice shrilled into a broken pitch. He was losing his composure with every building second and didn't care in the slightest. Larry wasn't going to win. Not this one and not this time. The smokery was his mother's baby, and she made it known how every single penny counted. Every dollar lost was food off the table, and she'd account for every piece of inventory, no matter how small. Benji had him. Stole? Me? I would never, Larry objected, then silenced himself when Samantha raised her hand. You mean the 2 cigars and the brandy? She asked. She pulled out 320s and flung them on the table in front of her. Samantha dropped her head into her hand, shaking. Larry sighed and comically glanced away, then looked to Benji's mother with pursed lips before returning his attention to Benji. Larry locked both hands and rested his head on his knuckles. His eyes thinned to slits. He pulled in a deep breath, and the room appeared to bend and buckle. Benji's lungs emptied in a huff, and he clasped a hand over his lips. To Benji, it felt like the whole damn town pulled in a breath and held it, waiting for Larry to exhale. Dust dancing in the early morning sunlight shimmered and then hovered, frozen in place. Larry's eyes clouded, appearing vitreous, transparent to translucent, with wispy tendrils of white seeping in from the edges. The room pulsed, walls rolling from ceiling to floor, pulling and pushing Benji, his head spinning. A haze of white light nipped at the edge of his consciousness, and Benji could feel his life slipping away. It was as if he didn't belong here at the table, the house, the town, the entire state of Missouri. He panicked and pressed his palm tight against his lips while simultaneously trying to scream. Benji's cheeks puffed, the little air left to him escaping through a gap between his fingers. Benji gasped, inhaled, blinked, and exhaled. Larry swallowed. The room unfolded, and the whites returned to Larry's devilish eyes. I think you need to go, Samantha said. Me too, Benji added, relieved his mother finally had come to her senses, while he regained his own. The hell just happened? Not him, you. I don't care where you go, Benjamin Watson. Go see your friends. Go play at the tracks. She leaned closer. Just go and think. Think about how rude you've been. I don't care what you do. Just get over. Samantha extended her hands. This. We'll talk tonight when She paused, then pulls Larry's hand into hers. When we get home. He couldn't finish his thought. I've been rolled again. Oh, he'd get this bastard for this one. Larry was not going to turn his mother against him. He just needed a few moments alone to talk some sense into her. She's smart, and she's got to see what this leatherjack is trying to do. Just a minute or two of reasonable discussion, and Mama collect her thoughts and kick this dirtbag to the curb. Now, Samantha demanded. Benji crumpled up his napkin and tossed it onto Larry's plate, then looked to his mother for one last pleading moment. She didn't relent, and her gaze did not falter. Benji shook his head, rose from his seat, and made for the door. He slipped into his leather jacket, turned and flipped Larry off. Probably not the most adult thing to do, but he was beyond caring at this point. Besides, a fight was coming, and Benji wanted Larry to know he was more than capable of waging war. He'd concede the day knowing time was on his side. After all, Benji held a permanent stake in this household. Larry was a treat for a lonely mother of one. He'd wear out his welcome with little help from Benji. He smiled wickedly at the old man, and Larry raised a single digit to his temple and tapped 3 times. Benji pedaled fast and hard, covering a full mile before exhaustion and heavy breathing forced him to stop and catch his breath. His mother's betrayal stung, and Benji was more than happy to hide his tears in the wind. Still, the energy spent pedaling served to calm his frayed nerves. Benji leaned on his handlebars, then spat. He scanned down Atlantic Avenue, one of Lauradelle's more significant highways, and the main thruway for the Northern District. Main Street sat between Atlantic and Magnolia Avenues, west of Lawson Boulevard. North of Main and Atlantic, in what was once considered the shipping district, most old warehouses and factories lay in ruin. They were reminders of when the town imported both coal and crude oil. Lauradelle had been both a river city and a railroad's way station once upon a time. He could probably learn more about the town's history, he supposed, might even find it interesting. 1/4 mile north of Atlantic was Lauradelle's vast switchyard. The crypt sat between it and the Mississippi River, with a dirt path leading to 3 buildings surrounding a retention pond. All 3 were abandoned and vandalized, primarily by Benji and his friends. Seeing little oncoming traffic, Benji crossed Atlantic and glided down Lawson, darting to the east side of the road at his first opportunity. 5 minutes of mindless pedaling led him to a fence surrounding an old Macy's distribution center. He was happy to see Mary's banana seat Schwinn and Lucas's mongoose chained a few yards up the trail between the tracks and the warehouse. It looked like the Crips were banging today. Benji parked his bike and stood quietly for a time, allowing the frigid air to chill his sweat-soaked body. Once cooled, Benji buttoned his leather jacket, pulled a butt from his half-spent pack of parliaments, and then hiked along the fence line toward the rising conversation of his 2 best friends. Sorry, my eyes are getting a little dry. He walked for a time, twirling his unlit cigarette between his fingers. Benji slid to the bottom of the sharp decline to the beach surrounding the retention pond. He lit a cigarette, inhaled, allowing the rush of nicotine to fog his mind, followed by a fit of coughing to announce his arrival. Lucas and Mary sat on milk crates near a campfire at the center of the clearing between the bridge abutments and the small retention pond in the valley of the abandoned building. Their voices echoed off brick and stone as if this tiny little destitute corner of town existed in its own compact universe. No one except the teens hung out here, Pirate Menzies being the exception. Still, even Edward's delusional adventure lasted no longer than a day. "Crumb cake?" Mary drawled. "Drop your cheeks, stay a while," she teased, offering Benji a warm smile beneath her sleepy eyes. He guessed she probably danced the green before arriving, knowing full well Lucas would have nervously run home had he smelled the pungent odor of Mary's rolled skunkweed. Marijuana had never bothered Benji. He tried it once, found the high extraordinarily low, and vowed to never touch it again. She waved, turned, and rested both elbows on her knees. Mary, who was never one for conformity, dressed oddly. Today she was elevated off her norm, which said a lot about her sense of style. She wore what he'd call an elf's cap or a sleeping hat. Long and pointed, the stocking hat was striped gray on black and hung well below her shoulders. The tip was adorned with a skull where a pom-pom should have been. She had a stitched yellow smiley face with X's for eyes on her left, facing Benji. She wore a denim jacket, sleeves cut beneath the elbows. She wore black cotton evening gloves with the fingertips cut out and had penned the words "never" in white ink. She wore cut-off shorts over spandex and unlaced combat boots. A strange duck, to be sure, but she was his strange duck. Lucas was the closest thing Benji had to a best friend, and if not for his dark hair and olive freckled skin compared to Benji's ghostly pale color and auburn hair, you'd think they were brothers, and no one would fault you for the comparison. They dressed similarly, which isn't hard to do when your entire wardrobe consisted of jeans, concert t-shirts, leather jackets, and sneakers. Neither sought popularity, and each mainly kept to himself whenever possible. Benji suspected this alone was reason enough for Mary to call them both friends. She was much of a loner as they were. "Hey guys," Benji offered while retrieving his milk crate stashed behind one of the metal buttresses of the bridge. "'Sup, bro? Mom got you working again? Haven't seen you since before Halloween." "Yeah, what's up with that?" Mary chimed in. "I thought we were going on a candy grab. Shit, I almost dressed up for it." "Almost? Looks like you still are dressed up for it." Mary stood, displayed her outfit, flipped Lucas off, then sat. Benji chuckled. "Nah," Benji replied beneath a sigh. "Just some shit going down is all." Both friends perked as he knew they would. Lucas nodded, which was his way of politely asking him to continue. Benji took a drag, coughed, and spat. "Out with it, Crumb. What's eating you? And give me that thing. Seriously, why do you bother?" Mary asked. She pulled the butt from Benji's lips, took a drag, inhaled, and released a slow trail of smoke from her nostrils. "It's my mom. She's banging some guy." "Shit, is that all? I'm surprised it took her this long," Lucas said. Mary nodded in agreement. "Who's the guy?" "I..." He paused for a moment to collect his thoughts. Did he want to tell these two who his mother was sleeping with? Well, no, not in 1,000 years, not with the shit talk that would follow. But damn, he had to tell someone, right? "I don't know, guys, I'm not sure." "Oh, hell no, you're not wimping out on us now," Mary said. Lucas scooted closer to Benji, concerned. "Spill it." "Wouldn't you rather hear about the pirate I met?" Lucas nodded eagerly. Mary punched Lucas's knee, displayed her hands, and then returned her attention to Benji. "I said out with it, Watson." "It's Larry Tweedle." Lucas snorted, then cupped a hand to his lips. "Old man Tweedle? Shit, dude, you're screwed." "I don't know," Mary said, glancing toward the cloudless sky. "She could do worse, you know." "You have got to be kidding," Benji replied. "Think about it. Dude owns a restaurant. Nice one, too. Not that my good-for-nothing parents would ever take me there. Food's way too salty. My mom says they're trying to cure meat. I think she means us," Lucas chuckled. "He's not too bad in the eyes for an old guy. He likes to talk and dresses like he owns his shit. Hell, Benji, it's got to be better than your old man, right?" "No," Benji replied sourly. "Not by a long shot." "And he smells like ass," Lucas added. I'm still working on Lucas's voice. Just bear with me. It'll come to me. Benji agreed. He smells like a cigar, and like your mother's cigar shop. Maybe she's thinking of your future? It is the 1990s, you know. I mean, everyone's talking about cancer and shit. Stabilize the Watson Castle before the federales outlaw smoking. Shit's crazy these days. "Yeah, and drinking too," Lucas offered. Both Mary and Benji curiously turned their heads. Lucas shrugged. "Just saying, shit's crazy. Why not reinstate prohibition?" "Back to the point," Mary said, shaking her head as she processed Lucas's grim prediction. "Maybe you should give the guy a chance." "Yeah, I agree. Then I won't have to call you Crumb anymore," Lucas added with a wicked smile. "I'd call you Subway." Mary considered the quip while Benji tried to wrap his mind around the poor setup to a terrible joke. Mary considered this, snickered, and covered her mouth. "Please tell me you're the name, right? BMT, the sub?" Lucas nodded excitedly. "Oh, yeah. We need to make him a Tweedle." What are you talking about?" Benji asked. He shook off the confusion. No, listen. I get a weird feeling around the guy. I mean it. I'm kind of scared for my mom." He lowered his head. "You know, she kicked me out of the house today." "No shit," Mary asked. "Like permanently, forever?" Lucas asked. "No, more like a I'm tired of your face kind of thing." I was arguing with Tweedle. I mean, the guy stole from the shop, and again, Benji had to consciously decide if he wanted to explain the events leading up to and after his untimely eviction. He thought on this for a moment until Mary pressed for the answer. "And what?" Benji explained how time seemed to freeze for him. He described the look in Tweedle's eyes as best he could, told them how the man slowed time and the darkness he felt afterward, finishing with, "Then he swallowed and everything went back to normal." That's some John Carpenter shit right there. You sure you're not making this up? I mean, when I argue with my parents, which is a lot, fucking bastards, I make shit up all the time. That's 'cause you're a loon, Lucas offered. Nah, I get it, Benji said. She's got a pretty rough. I mean, I've seen her dad go apeshit on her before. Yeah, I've got the bruises to prove it. Benji turned to Mary and shook his head. I don't think I am, Mary. There's something about him. He considered this for a time. The dude chills me, you know? Every time I look at him, I feel... Threatened? Mary asked. He agreed, although he didn't think that entirely covered it. Her suggestion was more of a mirror to her home life. Hell, the whole town knew about her old man's temper after a good night of boozing. Her mother, who wasn't exactly the picture of sobriety, had more calls to the sheriff's office than any other person in Lauradelle. Her dad had been in jail more times than Benji could count. Mary's mother had seen the inside of a cell more than once. Her family always seemed to be scrounging for cash, and when they didn't find any, well, Benji suspected a few of the area's home invasions were at the hands of her parents. Honestly, he's amazed Mary was not a full-on junkie with all the shit she's been put through. I don't know. I suppose I feel a little weird around him. The guy's a dick, sure, but there's something about him. He turned to them both in earnest. He scares the shit out of me. You think he's up to no good? Lucas asked. Lucas is supposed to be Spanish, by the way. I don't know why I keep coming up with a Long Island accent for him, but there it is. That's what I'm going with. Love you guys. Lucas asked. Benji thought he was. Oh yeah, that's not Carpenter then. That's full-on King. Stephen King? Mary clarified, and then added, and you're a dork. She turned to face Benji. You really think so? That Larry's out to harm your mom? Benji nodded. Okay then, let's put a tail in the prick. Oh, hell yeah, spies like us in full effect, Lucas cheered. No, idiot, now be quiet and listen. Tomorrow, after school, we'll meet at the smokery. Larry's restaurant is just up the road. She turned to Lucas, saying, Dork, get some money. Enough to where we can, I don't know, get some desserts or something. Why me? Lucas asked. 'Cause your parents rock the savings and Crumb's mom wants him dead. Tomorrow, Benji and I will meet up after school, grab a table, get some dessert, and maybe a soda or two. Maybe I'll see what you see. You'd do that? Of course we would, Lucas offered. Best buds, right? Well, we are, Benji teased. She's more of a third wheel. Oh, the BMT finally found a sense of humor, Mary said. Lucas nearly fell over laughing. Benji hadn't the foggiest clue what they were on about and wasn't going to ask. Now, Mr. Crumb, tell us about this pirate. And that concludes Chapter 3 of the Stitches on the Stone. I hope you enjoy it. I will definitely get another one out next week. And smaller chapters, I'll do some happy little weird, quirky news for you. Until then, I will see you next time. Catch you on the flip.